This is the multi-voice text-to-speech podfic reading of Starting as Stone by Synonomy, composed by Burning Aurora. Remus woke with a snarl in his head and an itch he felt down to his bones. Consciousness dawned rapidly and unpleasantly upon him, the way it always did when the moon was close. He felt the dips and textures of the mattress underneath him, the stifling weight of the blanket, the layer of sweat sticking it all to his skin. He blinked blearily, registering the light of early morning sneaking in through the gaps in the blinds. He rolled onto his back with a groan, shoving at the blanket in desperation to get to the cool air. He startled when Sirius shifted next to him. He was lying on his side facing Remus, bare-chested, skin pale in the murky dim. His dark hair was a mess, matching the dark of the eyelashes fanned over his cheeks, the stark lines of his tattoos. An arm was curled protectively around the huge swell of his belly. Looking at him, something stirred low in Remus's gut, drowning out the discomfort. As if in a trance, he edged closer, leaning carefully towards Sirius's neck. He didn't want to wake him. Sirius had to rest, had to take it easy, but Remus needed. His eyes fluttered shut as he inhaled, biting back an instinctive growl. Sirius's scent had always been incredible, equally capable of driving Remus wild and calming him to the core, but since the pregnancy he smelled like pure ambrosia, rich and heady and sweet. He smelled like Remus. It made him want to. He pulled back sharply. He cringed when Sirius frowned, mumbling something in his sleep, but after a beat his face relaxed and he slept on. He looked so beautiful, even drooling into his pillow, but there was a weight settling in Remus's chest. He knew Sirius was liable to wake up agitated and needy. He was frequently hyper-aroused since crossing into the third trimester, and he relied on Remus to take care of him, which Remus was usually only too happy to do. But now the idea filled him with dread. Of course, Remus was always uneasy at this time of the month. He had spent his entire life trying to distance himself from the wolf, keep it suppressed, but when the moon was waxing it was impossible to contain completely. It had taken a great deal of time before Remus stopped hating himself for it, before he managed to curb the constant fretting about being too rough, too pushy, too possessive, helped in no small part by Sirius's shameless enjoyment of those feral tendencies. But the pregnancy had taken things to another level entirely. It had become apparent very quickly that the wolf liked it, approved of it. Something dark and deeply primitive rumbled with satisfaction at the sight of Sirius so full, whispered mine in a way that was somehow different to the word in Remus's own mouth. The further along Sirius got, the louder the wolf became, and the more worried Remus felt. He had managed to keep a lid on it thus far, perhaps out of sheer determination to see Sirius always taken care of, but last month had been very touch and go. And now, with only one moon left until the birth, it seemed he was finally reaching his limit. Teeth gritted, Remus forced himself to pull away entirely from Sirius, ignoring the howl of protest in the back of his mind. He slipped out of bed, quietly gathered some clean clothes, taking them to the bathroom on the other side of the house. Guilt was a burden bearing down on him, but he told himself it was a preferable alternative to the hurt and horror he might inflict if he let the wolf have its way. He took a lukewarm shower, keeping his hands firmly away from his cock. As he got dressed, Remus heard the floor creak and a thud he would recognize anywhere as Harry's little feet hitting his bedroom floor. Grateful at the opportunity for diversion, Remus made his way briskly to the kitchen. Sure enough, he found Harry in there, still in his pajamas, head buried in one of the counter cabinets.
"Harry,"
Remus admonished. Harry jumped, slamming the cabinet shut.
"I wasn't doing anything."
"Really? Because I could have sworn you were rummaging in the cupboard."
"No,"
Harry said slowly. His wild black hair was stuck up at odd angles. Remus had a sudden vision of James falling through the curtains of his Hogwarts four-poster.
"I mean, I was just looking."
And what did you find?"
"Nothing."
"Nothing, indeed."
Harry pouted.
"Where did you put the sweets?"
"Me? Nowhere,"
Remus said innocently.
"I think the pixies might have moved them, but I heard they put them somewhere safely out of reach to boys who haven't had a proper breakfast."
Fine.
Harry huffed.
I'll have breakfast, then.
Wonderful. What would you like?
Harry considered.
Toast. With jam.
Not marmalade.
No, jam.
All right, jam it is. And to drink.
Tea.
Are you sure?
Harry nodded eagerly.
Earl Grey.
Really? I can't tempt you with a spot of peppermint. Chamomile.
No, Earl Grey.
Remus couldn't help but smile.
All right, sit down, then.
Harry obediently went to the table, and Remus threw himself into preparing the breakfast. It was a pleasant enough distraction. He managed to time it perfectly so the toaster popped just as the tea brewed, and Harry always made him feel grounded, even when he was being a menace. Remus made sure to cast a cooling spell on the cup before setting everything down in front of him. Harry immediately began slurping the tea, pausing only to dip his toast into it, leaving whirls of butter and jam floating on the surface. Remus fondly wondered how Sirius could think this made Harry grown up in any way. He didn't feel like eating himself, so he poured his own cup of tea and joined Harry at the table.
How long now?
Harry asked. It was his favorite question of late.
Not long at all.
Remus said. His stomach twisted.
Just a month or so.
Is Hera coming soon?
Yes.
There was another twist as Remus remembered.
Today, actually.
Or, so I'll be at school.
Unfortunately, yes. I'm sorry. Should I tell her you say hi?
Yes.
Harry looked dejected. He had taken to the healer quite strongly, fascinated by her uniform and bag of medical instruments, bothering her with endless questions.
I wanted to ask her more about healers.
Like what?
Like if the baby needs medicine.
Harry said, enthusiasm growing with every word.
How do they give? How does it go in the belly?
Remus frowned.
Why would the baby need medicine?
Maybe if they're ill.
What do you mean?
Remus's tone was sharp. Harry's smile faded.
I don't know.
The shame was sudden.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Harry.
Remus shook his head, as though to clear it.
I'm, not sure. I imagine most of the time, if you give the parent the medicine, it will find its way to the baby.
Okay.
Harry said quietly. He returned to his breakfast. Remus went to the sink and dumped out the remains of his tea. He cleaned the kitchen while he waited for Harry to finish, then whisked him off to get him ready for school. Thankfully, Harry did not remain despondent. But he did start burbling about his imminent sibling, the way he had also taken to doing lately. He had decided he wanted a little brother, who would follow him and play games with him, but they wouldn't be allowed in his room unless Harry said it was okay, and if they touched his prized beginner's clean sweep, Harry would have to pinch them. Though Remus usually found it endearing, this morning it was setting his teeth on edge. He did his best to respond normally, but it was a relief when he dropped Harry off at the school gates. When he returned to the house, Sirius was still asleep, and that was a relief too. Both things hurt to admit to himself. He decided he would spend the day working in the tiny room their estate agent had tried to pass off as a fourth bedroom, otherwise known as his study. He sat at his desk, trying his best to summon a shred of attention for Percy Weasley's overview of garden gnomes. The boy wrote very eloquently for a 9-year-old, though Remus thought he might have misspelled the Latin name for the species. He couldn't seem to recall the correct way either, so he reached for his copy of Common Magical Pests. As he pulled the book from the shelf, something fell out from between the pages. He stilled when he saw what it was, a bookmark he had made of an old photograph. It was a picture of a teenage Sirius, and himself lounging on the grass of the Hogwarts grounds. Sirius was grinning, an arm slung around Remus's shoulders, ruffling his hair. Remus was smiling shyly, shoving at Sirius half-heartedly. Though the picture was in black and white, Remus could tell by their squints, and the way their uniforms were hanging off them that it was the height of summer. His first instinct was to smile. He remembered James laughing as he took the picture. They had finished their exams and were enjoying the freedom and the sun, blissfully unaware of all the horrors soon to come in their lives. That was the summer Lily finally said yes to a date with James. The year Sirius kissed Remus, not for the first time, technically, but Remus still thought of it as such, because it was the first time Sirius had done it without an audience or bravado of any kind. Things had developed quickly after that. But Remus also remembered where the picture was taken. The hill overlooking the willow. Despite his smile, his younger self looked defeated, exhausted. His face was gaunt, heavy dark circles under his eyes. The sagging neckline of his Gryffindor jumper revealed a fresh scar across a very prominent collarbone. He recalled Sirius was the only reason he had mustered the strength to venture out onto the grounds in the first place. He would have sooner been huddled up in the dorm, but Sirius's scent was always irresistible with the sheen of sweat upon his skin, and Remus had been eager to shed the anger he was still harboring after the Snape incident. The memory hit him hard and sudden. He had been so desperate to put it behind them, that time he almost killed somebody because of Sirius. That time Sirius had reminded him, in the starkest, darkest way possible, that once a month for the rest of his life, Remus would lose himself to a murderous monster. Up until that point, Sirius had only been determined to make him forget. Which was why it had felt like such a profound betrayal, despite knowing Sirius didn't intend it as such. As far as Sirius was concerned, it actually had very little to do with Remus at all. It was just the impulsive whim of an idiot with a petty schoolboy rivalry. But it had demonstrated how Sirius didn't really understand the reality of the situation. What it was like to live with Remus's condition. Even now, so many years and moons later, sometimes Remus couldn't help but wonder if Sirius still didn't understand. Because if he did, how could he possibly want? The door opened. Remus quickly hunched back over his desk, sliding the photo under a stack of parchment.
"Hey, you,"
Sirius said. He took the 2 steps required to reach the desk, setting down a cup of steaming green tea next to Percy's essay.
"Your potion's in there."
Oh, thank you, love,
Remus said, feeling immediately guilty for his recent thoughts. Sirius hovered next to him as he sipped the tea. Remus tried to keep his eyes on his cup.
"Missed you this morning,"
Sirius said lightly.
I know, I'm sorry. I had work to catch up on, and I would rather get it done before the moon.
The lie stuck in his throat. Sirius hummed.
"Is it a bad one? You look sore."
Remus hesitated, then nodded. Sirius tutted in sympathy. Remus tensed when he laid a hand on the back of his chair, jostling its rickety frame.
"Might help if you let me buy you a decent chair."
Sirius mused.
"This one is falling apart. You're gonna break your ass when it goes."
It's fine,
Remus said. All the furniture in his study was old, a hodgepodge he'd collected from charity shops and clearance sales, but he had spruced it all up with magic. The chair wasn't the most comfortable or attractive, but it was functional.
"It's not though, is it?"
Sirius said.
"You have a nice ass, Mooney. I'd hate to see it broken."
Remus did his best to imitate a laugh, but it was a beat too late. Thankfully, Sirius didn't seem to notice.
"Go on, let me buy you a nice new chair."
No, thank you.
"Why not?"
You know why.
"I know pride is stupid."
It's not pride.
"The fuck it isn't."
Sirius huffed.
"Doesn't even make sense, either. You'll let me buy you a 1,000-galleon robe suit, but not a bloody chair."
That was a one-off.
Remus said tightly.
I needed it for special occasions, and I'd never have been able to afford it on my own. And I said I wasn't happy about the price. I would have been fine with the cheaper one.
Sirius snorted.
"That one made you look like Slughorn. I did you a favor."
I don't want favors. I want to pay my own way, when I can.
"Your own way."
Sirius repeated flatly.
"Mooney, we're mated. What's mine is yours."
I said no, Sirius.
It was a familiar argument. To Sirius, it was simple. He had a lot, Remus had little, so why shouldn't he share? But Sirius didn't understand what it was like to grow up with nothing, to have to earn every last thing you had, and how, paradoxically perhaps, that made you resistant to just being handed things. To say nothing of the fact it shouldn't be Sirius taking care of him, anyway. Sirius sighed.
"You're so fucking stubborn."
That's rather rich, coming from you.
There was a pause that felt a little too heavy. Remus swallowed, realizing he had to look at Sirius. He set his tea down, turning his chair towards him. He was careful to keep his gaze north of Sirius's belly, but that didn't help much, since every inch of Sirius was gorgeous. His face could have been carved out of marble, Remus thought, every line and angle of it more pleasing than the last. His lovely dark hair was pulled back in its trademark messy bun, a couple of loose strands twisting around those beautiful bruised blue eyes. There was a haughty quirk to his pretty mouth. He didn't look particularly upset.
I'm sorry, love,
Remus said anyway.
It's just the moon.
I know. It's all right.
Sirius paused.
Anything I can do to make it better?
Before Remus could answer, Sirius had taken a step forward, so he was standing between Remus's knees. Remus's breath caught. Sirius's belly was suddenly right under his nose. His hands rose to it automatically, spreading out on either side of the vast curve. Heat was radiating through Sirius's t-shirt, quickly warming Remus's palms, and Remus felt an answering flush rising through his face.
This is mine,
that dark voice growled.
I did this. I put that there.
Remus wrenched his eyes upward, only to be struck by the long column of alabaster that was Sirius's neck, unblemished but for the mottled skin of his scar. Another mark of Remus's claiming. Another displayed to the whole world that Sirius was his. As Remus looked at it, he felt his teeth fighting to bear. Was it bright and bold enough for everyone to see? He wondered if he should bite Sirius again, just to make sure. Unnerved by his own thoughts, he made to pull away, but Sirius crowded closer. He put his hands on Remus's shoulders, and suddenly Remus could smell Sirius's arousal, that sweet slickness growing between his legs. Remus's mouth watered. His cock was hard in seconds. Sirius leaned in, murmuring in his ear,
Let's go to bed. Don't think it'll take long, for either of us.
It dawned on Remus that Sirius had wanted this before he entered the study. He had probably been suffering all day, after waking up hard and desperate, and being crushed to find himself alone, abandoned by his awful, neglectful mate. Guilt burned through Remus, coiling into his own arousal like a spring, making it hard to recall why he had done such a senseless thing in the first place. He had to give Sirius what he needed, what only Remus could give to him. He had to keep him sated, keep him full and knotted and claimed and safe, keep everyone else away. He pictured springing to his feet and engulfing Sirius in his arms, touching him with claws and kissing him with teeth, shoving him face first over the desk, yanking down his joggers, legs kicked apart, and cheeks spread wide so Remus could see exactly how well Sirius took his cock. He would pound deep into that dripping, clenching, perfect heat, come inside him again and again and again, as many times as it took to be satisfied Sirius knew to whom he belonged, that he knew who his alpha was. Remus pushed himself backwards so suddenly the chair squeaked in protest.
No, I don't think we should.
Sirius blinked at him, hands still hovering where they had been gripping Remus's shoulders.
What?
I don't think it's a good idea.
Why?
Remus cast around for words that sounded reasonable.
I don't want to hurt you.
Sirius frowned.
Why would you hurt me?
Because of the moon.
What are you talking about? You don't hurt me on the moons. At least, not in any way I don't like.
But I could,
Remus admitted wretchedly.
I think I might.
But why?
Sirius pressed.
What's so different this time?
I don't know. The wolf, it's been having you like this.
It likes that I'm up the duff, yeah, I know.
Sirius said dryly.
But why should that mean it would hurt me? It hasn't so far, has it?
It's never been like this before. We're so close to the birth now, and I.
Remus's heart clenched. He didn't know how to finish that sentence.
What, for the fatter I am, the hornier it is.
Sirius snorted.
That dirty old wolf.
There's nothing dirty about it.
Remus snapped, surprising himself.
You're full with my child. You've never looked more beautiful. Never looked more like mine.
Sirius's eyes widened, breath catching. Dismayed by his outburst, Remus held out his palms.
See, I'm not in control. I shouldn't even be around you until after the moon. Or ever.
Something spitefully whispered.
Don't be stupid.
Sirius said sharply.
I'm not. I'm being the opposite of stupid. Responsible.
No, you're being stupid, because you're not going to hurt me.
Sirius said, voice rising.
I don't care how randy that old dog is. I know you, and you would never let that happen.
Remus shook his head, but Sirius was undeterred.
Anyway, why would the wolf want to hurt me, if it's so chuffed I'm having its pup?
Remus tried not to flinch at the phrasing. He determinedly ignored the grumble of agreement in the back of his mind.
Why are you trying to apply logic to a fundamentally illogical creature? You know how it works. Maybe it doesn't want to hurt you, necessarily, but it does want to dominate you, as a wolf does. And it doesn't understand that you have different limits. If I were to truly lose control.
You won't.
You don't know that. I'm not.
Remus snapped his mouth shut, but Sirius already looked dangerous.
What?
Sirius folded his arms over his belly.
You're not what, Remus?
Remus exhaled.
I'm just trying to keep you safe. Maybe you're right, maybe it would be totally fine. But what if it wasn't? You know I couldn't handle that, Sirius. If I hurt you, or the baby, I'd never forgive myself.
Sirius's expression softened. He sighed, holding up his hands.
Fine. If it will make you feel better, we'll wait until after the moon. But you are not shutting yourself away from me.
It wasn't the relief Remus was hoping for, but it was something.
Thank you, sweetheart. I'm sorry, I know you're
horny as hell. Yeah, no shit.
Sirius sniped.
But, whatever, I can deal with it. It wouldn't be good anyway, if you were just worrying the whole time. Just make it up to me in a couple of days, I guess.
Okay,
Remus said. He tried not to dwell on the part of his stomach that didn't untwist. Sirius pulled his t-shirt back down. Remus let out a breath.
What time's the appointment, again?
1:30.
Sirius glanced at the clock on Remus's desk, humming.
Half an hour. I just have time for a bath, then.
Remus looked at the time too, surprised. Merlin, he had been sitting here uselessly for hours. When he stood up, Sirius made an aborted move towards him, and Remus was struck with sadness and shame. He really was a terrible mate, a terrible partner. He didn't dare hold Sirius even just to reassure him.
It's okay. It's only 2 days.
Sirius said like he was talking to himself.
And this is the last moon before I pop, right?
Right.
Sirius looked at him, then.
Are you alright, Moony? Other than this, I mean. And the moon, obviously, but there's nothing else bothering you.
I'm fine.
Remus said quickly.
Go on, love, have your bath. I'll get the living room ready.
Sirius still looked suspicious. He didn't move right away, but when Remus made motions towards the door, he let himself be ushered out. After they parted ways in the hall, Remus busied himself with his task. He started by clearing away the game of Cluedo that was still sitting in the middle of the rug from last night, then used magic to return the other various toys and furnishings to their proper places, reluctant to bend and stoop any more than was necessary. There was no escaping the ache in his head, though. When he was done, Remus sat on the sofa to wait, staring blankly into the fireplace. The proximity alarm almost made him jump out of his skin. Sirius rushed into the room shortly after, swearing as he scraped his damp hair into a loose ponytail. Remus stood up beside him just as green flames roared behind the grate. He recognized the figure of Hera, petite and curly-haired in her St. Mungo's uniform, but he was surprised to see she wasn't alone. Another person stepped out after her, a man Remus did not know, also dressed in the healer's uniform. He was tall, though not as tall as Remus, with dark hair and blue eyes, but otherwise unremarkable.
Sirius, Remus.
Hera greeted them briskly.
Good to see you both. I'm short on time, so I'll cut right to the chase. I'm terribly sorry, but I'm not going to be able to handle your appointment today.
Oh.
Sirius said, clearly downcast.
Why not?
It's a long story.
She said wearily.
Best not get me started. Let's just say, the perils of managing people.
Nothing too catastrophic, I hope.
Remus offered.
Oh, not at all. Just a small threat to the entire hospital and magical community at large. Nothing to worry about. But just to be on the safe side, I need to take care of it. I should be there right now, really, but I didn't feel right just sending Isaac over without an introduction.
Remus looked at the stranger, who nodded back at him.
Isaac.
How do you do?
Isaac offered Remus a hand. Remus hesitantly accepted the handshake, subtly leaning in until he caught Isaac's scent. It was faint and unassuming, definitely not alpha. Beta, Remus realized.
He's the best I have available from Natal,
Hera said, and Remus suddenly understood. Isaac was her replacement. His alarm must have shown on his face, because Hera continued apologetically.
I know it's not ideal, but there's no telling how long it will be before you can see me again. And since this is your last appointment before the birth, I really recommend just getting it done.
Yeah.
Sirius said.
No, it's fine, Hera. We understand.
Well, Remus said. Sirius shrugged at him.
It is what it is, Mooney. Let's just get it over with.
Mooney.
Isaac repeated, smiling.
That's a funny nickname.
Remus felt his lip fighting to curl. He glanced at Hera, who ever so slightly shook her head. Isaac didn't know about his condition then. While Remus appreciated that she would afford him that discretion, the less people knew, the better. It worried him, too. This poor man had absolutely no idea what he had just walked into. Hera clearly didn't keep up with the lunar calendar, because there was no way she would have done this otherwise, Remus thought.
So it's really all right with you, Sirius?
Hera asked. Remus felt something approaching panic. The idea of an unfamiliar beta touching Sirius made his skin crawl. It made him angry. It had taken him a while to become completely comfortable even with Hera, and she was a mated Omega. He tried desperately to catch Sirius's eye again, but Sirius seemed to be keeping his attention deliberately focused on Hera.
Yeah.
Sirius said, shrugging again.
Like you said, we need to get it done. As long as it's still you delivering this kid.
It will be, absolutely.
Hera assured him.
I'll make the time. First sign of labor, you send me that Patronus like we discussed. For now, though, I'll leave you in Isaac's capable hands.
Isaac nodded reassuringly. Remus had a sudden mad urge to shove him into the fireplace.
All right. Thanks.
Sirius and Hera hugged, both laughing as his belly got in the way.
And thanks for coming to let us know.
No problem at all. Honey, I'll see you soon.
She grabbed a handful of flu powder, then winked at Sirius.
Don't start any brawls while I'm gone.
You know that gets funnier every time.
Sirius said dryly.
Say hi to the little man for me, too.
Not a chance.
Hera chuckled, nodded at Remus, then disappeared into the flames. There was an awkward silence in her wake. Isaac coughed, holding up his medical bag.
Well, shall we get started then, Sirius? I can call you Sirius.
Oh yeah, fine.
Are we doing this here?
Yeah.
Sirius said.
I mean, Hera usually does, but we can go somewhere else.
It's up to you.
Isaac said warmly.
Wherever you feel most comfortable. And wherever there's enough room, obviously.
Some of the tension drained from Sirius's shoulders.
Here's fine.
Great. Just let me get set up, then.
Isaac opened his bag and pulled something out. Remus knew from past appointments it was the miniaturized examination bench, and placed it in the center of the living room rug. He then drew his wand. Sirius stepped back, but Remus didn't move.
Excuse me, Remus.
Isaac said pleasantly.
Or should I call you Mooney, too?
Remus couldn't help but think that Mr. Lupin would be most appropriate, for him and for Sirius, but the idea of saying so made him cringe, even now.
Remus is fine, thank you. Would you mind telling me what exactly you plan to do?
Of course.
Isaac said, but he addressed Sirius when he spoke.
We're just doing a basic examination today. So vitals, fetal stats, that sort of thing. It shouldn't be anything you haven't already done with Hera, but this time is particularly important, since you both have to be ready for the big day. So, I'll mostly be looking for any potential issues. Does that sound all right to you?
Sounds good to me.
Sirius agreed. He took Remus by the arm, tugging him out of the way. As Isaac set about enlarging the bench and preparing the examination area, he leaned close to Remus and spoke quietly.
Relax. You can handle it.
I don't know, Pads.
Remus muttered.
This isn't a good idea.
You'll be fine.
I really don't think.
If you honestly think you're gonna fucking maul him, then tell him to leave.
Sirius whispered harshly.
Otherwise shut up and deal with it, because I need you.
Remus couldn't help but flinch. Sirius's eyes were dark and narrowed, but there was no malice there, Remus realized. It was more like a challenge. Like the notion Remus would maul anyone was clearly ridiculous, and he was just being hysterical or paranoid for wanting Isaac to leave, as opposed to reasonably concerned. It seemed incredibly naive, even for Sirius, who had always been relentlessly idealistic when it came to the wolf. Had he not witnessed what Remus could do when pushed to breaking point? Isaac cleared his throat.
When you're ready then, Sirius.
In addition to the bench, Isaac had also produced a stool for himself, as well as a small table where his various instruments were laid out. With one last hard look at Remus, Sirius laid down and presented his belly, pulling his shirt up to his nipples. Predictably, Remus felt his hackles raise. But he exhaled slowly, willing himself to calm down. This was happening. He couldn't tell Isaac to leave, not now. Even if this wasn't important, he couldn't let Sirius down again. Logically, Remus knew the healer wasn't the real reason for his anxiety, anyway. Isaac seemed like a perfectly friendly and respectable person. He just had to keep reminding himself of that fact. The conflict must have shown on his face, because Isaac suggested gently.
Perhaps it would be better if you left the room, Remus.
No.
Sirius said firmly.
I need him here.
Generally, we do like the patient's mate to be present for these exams.
Isaac agreed.
That's why we assign a single healer to attend you throughout the entire pregnancy, so you can both form a bond of trust with them. But in unforeseen circumstances like this,
He'll be fine.
Isaac looked at Remus, who didn't argue. Truthfully, he didn't think he was capable of leaving Sirius alone anyway, even if the rational part of his mind agreed it would be sensible. Isaac still looked wary, but he shrugged.
all right. Do me a favor, though, and let me know if it starts getting to be too much. We can always take a break.
Remus just nodded. He couldn't say they were already past that point. Isaac waved his wand, and a matching stool appeared on the other side of the bench.
I'm going to start by having a little feel of your stomach, Sirius, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Remus perched stiffly on the conjured stool. Sirius took his hand, which ordinarily would calm him, but there were limits to its effectiveness, and another man's hands on his mate's bare belly was very much one of them. Rage twisted hotly in Remus's gut. He grit his teeth and tried to breathe through it.
You have a lot of tattoos.
Isaac commented.
Yeah. They're all fucked up now, though.
Sirius said mournfully.
Ah, don't worry. They should mostly go back to normal after the birth.
Remus recognized that Isaac was probably just trying to break the tension, but was it not bad enough that he was touching Sirius? Did he really have to talk about how Sirius had decorated his body, too? It wasn't his place to even notice that. As Remus watched Isaac's fingers press and palpate Sirius's skin, he imagined his canine maw ripping them off, which disturbed him enough that he forced himself to look away for a moment.
That all feels very normal. But I'd like to do a projection anyway, just to double-check.
Isaac smiled.
And you can have a last little look, before they're here in person.
Oh, brilliant.
Sirius said eagerly. Isaac placed the tip of his wand against Sirius's stomach, muttering the spell that would allow them to see a representation of its interior in a speckled cloud of silver dust above their heads. Mercifully, Remus was relieved of his agitation as the particles formed the shape of their child. It had become gradually less amorphous as the months went by, and it had never been more tangible than it was now. Remus could see all four limbs moving in the encasing circle, the curve of a lightly haired head, even the hint of a face. But it was Sirius that made Remus's heart thud the hardest. He was staring with an expression of pure reverence. His wonder had never diminished, despite the numerous times they had done this. He caught Remus's eye and grinned back at him, an edge of disbelief to it.
Fetal position is fine. Amniotic fluid looks good. Moving well.
Isaac was muttering.
Hera tells me you don't want to know the sex or likely presentation.
That's right.
Sirius said.
May I ask why?
Sirius bristled a little.
Why does it matter?
Oh, I don't think it should, personally.
Isaac assured him.
I'm just curious. Most parents want to know. You see.
Well, we don't care.
Sirius said firmly.
Right, Mooney.
It's not important to us.
Remus agreed, heart fluttering again. The intensity of his love for Sirius scared him, sometimes.
Well, good for you. Anyway, this all looks absolutely fine. Let's just have a little listen, too.
Isaac flicked his wand again, and a soft, rhythmic thudding filled the air. Sirius's eyes widened.
Is that?
Your baby's heartbeat.
Isaac confirmed.
This addition to the projection spell was just approved for widespread use.
Oh wow.
Sirius breathed.
Are you hearing this, Mooney?
Remus nodded, smiling helplessly.
It sounds strong.
Course it is.
Sirius beamed, squeezing his hand.
It's yours.
Yours.
Though the wolf preened, Remus felt his smile fade. He saw Sirius frown slightly in response, but he couldn't help it.
Yep, it sounds great.
Isaac agreed.
Looks like everything checks out.
Are you sure?
Remus asked without thinking.
Everything looks normal.
Yes. No problems that I can see.
What if there are problems you can't see?
Isaac cocked his head.
Is there something specific you're concerned about?
Remus quickly shut his mouth, shaking his head, but there was a twisting fist behind his ribs, squeezing in time with the heartbeat echoing in the air. It sounded normal, he thought. It sounded human. But so did Remus's own heart, probably. All those times Sirius had laid his head upon Remus's chest, he had never said anything. He wouldn't keep quiet about something like that just to avoid upsetting Remus, would he? No. Sirius didn't do that. He was honest to a fault. He wasn't a coward like Remus.
Are you sure?
Isaac pressed.
Now's the time to say.
No.
Remus said, quiet.
No, just a general concern.
Isaac hummed with understanding.
You're nervous. It's natural, especially for first-time parents. But you don't have to worry. I'm very happy with what I've seen.
Sirius was still frowning, eyes dark with realization. That look went right to Remus. He should have known he couldn't hide from him for long. He tried to convey his contrition back to him. He knew their child's health should be enough for him, that nothing else should matter. But what Remus knew and what he felt were two very different things right now. He had already known that Hera had never found anything unusual about the pregnancy. The fact she hadn't thought his condition pertinent information for Isaac clearly proved she was satisfied in that regard. But that didn't make a difference to how Remus felt. He could handle his anxiety about this when things were well and good, when the wolf was quieter than Sirius's reassuring words. But with it so agitated now, so intrusive, all Remus could think was their child might one day have to experience this too. And it was all his fault. Isaac banished the projection and heartbeat with a flick of his wand, and Remus felt his anger surge back in its wake.
I'll just check you over now, Sirius. But honestly, I'm not expecting any problems there, either. I can tell you've kept yourself in good health, too.
Good health. Had Remus imagined the emphasis Isaac placed on those words? He watched the healer carefully, but Isaac's eyes didn't appear to be lingering on Sirius's body. He was obviously doing it covertly, Remus thought. Sirius was gorgeous. There was no way Isaac couldn't be looking, admiring, imagining.
I don't know. I did my best,
Sirius said. Remus tried to breathe, but Isaac was touching Sirius again, not only his belly but his arms and chest and neck, measuring things with different instruments from the table.
Blood pressure's good, magic reserves very good. As expected, you've done very well indeed.
Thanks,
Sirius said, looking pleased. Isaac smiled back at him, still absently cupping the swell of Sirius's stomach, and Remus felt something snap. His stool clattered against the floor as he sprung to his feet, slamming his hands against the bench.
Enough,
he snarled.
Take your fucking hands off of him.
Isaac immediately stood, palms raised.
Whoa, hey, Remus. It's okay.
Remus vaguely registered Sirius gripping his elbow, heard him saying something low and urgent. The red receded from the edges of his vision, but he still needed the healer away from Sirius right now.
You're done,
he told Isaac through gritted teeth.
Leave.
Isaac nodded quickly, reaching for his bag.
Yeah, sure, no problem. We're finished anyway. Everything looks good. Just let me pack my things away.
A heavy silence fell over the room as Isaac began gathering his things together, keeping his head lowered and eyes averted. As Remus breathed, heartbeat loud in his ears, the sensation of Sirius's hand on his elbow came further into focus. He managed to pull his eyes away from Isaac to look at Sirius. He was still frowning. He didn't look angry, but he did look disappointed, and that was always worse. Instantly, Remus felt himself deflate. Despite his best efforts, he had revealed himself to be the beast that he was, and he had let Sirius down once again. He backpedaled from the bench and sank down onto the sofa, chest sinking with it.
Sorry about that,
Sirius said. Isaac waved a hand.
It's all right. Occupational hazard. I've been trained to handle it.
No,
Remus agreed quietly.
that was not okay. I apologize.
Isaac paused to look at him.
Really, Remus, it's okay. Actually, you're one of the more tolerant alphas I've dealt with.
Remus scoffed weakly. That couldn't possibly be true.
No, really.
I believe it.
Sirius said. Isaac nodded.
Hence why I didn't insist that he leave.
Well, I should have, clearly.
Remus muttered.
Nah, it's still good that you stayed.
Isaac said, resuming packing.
It's always better for the patient to have their mate there.
Remus glanced at Sirius.
Always. You've never witnessed the catastrophic implosion of a relationship.
Isaac chuckled.
Well, once or twice, maybe. But you two don't worry me on that front. You're clearly devoted to each other.
Sirius looked back at Remus steadily.
So everything's all right with the kid, then?
You're both in great shape.
Isaac confirmed. He reshrunk the bench and finished packing, straightening up with his medical bag.
Now you just have to wait. Basically, keep yourself comfortable and stay alert. Like Hera said, the first sign of labor, send her that Patronus. Or if for some reason you can't reach her, you can send one to me.
All right.
Sirius said.
Thanks, Isaac.
Yes, thank you.
Remus echoed, meaning it.
You're very welcome.
Isaac smiled. He grabbed a handful of powder and climbed into the fireplace.
Congratulations in advance, and good luck to you both.
The flames roared, and then the living room was suddenly very still and very quiet. Sirius moved to crouch down in front of the sofa, slightly awkward with his bump, resting his palms on Remus's thighs. His hands were warm through the fabric of Remus's trousers. It felt good anchoring. There still wasn't any anger in his expression, though there was perhaps a hint of menace in his eyes. Such minute units were usually obsolete when measuring Sirius, so Remus couldn't say for sure.
I'm sorry,
Remus said.
What are you sorry for?
everything.
Remus thought. Except he couldn't say that, because Sirius would never forgive him. And even now, Remus knew it wasn't true.
I'll tell you what you should be sorry for.
Sirius said.
The only thing. You lied to me.
Remus shook his head.
You're worried about the kid. That they might be a wolf.
Yes,
Remus admitted.
but I didn't.
You didn't talk to me.
Sirius cut him off.
You pretended you were fine. That's fucking lying, Remus. You can't do that to me.
How could I have told you that?
Remus implored.
What would it have achieved? What's done is done. The baby is coming, either way.
There's always a point in talking to me. Always.
Remus shook his head again.
You don't need to be burdened with my insecurities. You need me to be strong for you.
Sirius rolled his eyes.
Sometimes I wonder if you even know what mated means. It means we're in us. We deal with our shit together.
But this isn't our shit, is it?
Remus said tightly.
It's mine. It's always mine.
Barlox, no it isn't. We both know I've given you far more grief than you've ever given me.
I don't know that, Pads. Maybe in the past, when there was plenty of grief to go around.
Remus trailed off, reluctant to remember those awful times.
But now all I see is the strain my condition puts on you. All I see is me letting you down over and over again.
Oh, shut up, Mooney.
Sirius said fondly.
You do not let me down.
How can you say that? After everything that's happened today.
All that's happened today is you protecting me.
Sirius said simply.
The way you've always done.
How on earth did I protect you earlier? You needed me, and I left you.
You were trying to keep me safe. Even from you. I'd say that's the bloody opposite of letting me down.
But you didn't even believe.
Oh, I still think it's Barlox.
Sirius assured him.
I still know you'd never hurt me. But that's beside the point.
How do you know?
Remus demanded.
How are you so sure? You've seen what I'm capable of. You saw what I just did.
All right, so you lost your temper.
Sirius allowed.
But did you hurt him? No. You handled the situation like a fucking champion, just like I knew you would. How can you not see that? Didn't you hear what Isaac just said?
He was just trying to reassure you.
Merlin, you're impossible.
Sirius huffed a laugh.
You watched a strange man put his hands all over me, right before the fucking moon, and not only didn't break his neck, but apologized to him before he left.
I almost did break his neck.
Remus argued.
I could have.
Nah. You wouldn't have, because you knew he didn't deserve it. Because you're still you, even when you're being all big bad alpha wolf.
Sirius smiled, squeezing Remus's thighs.
That's how I'm so sure. I know you, Remus. I trust you. I just wish you would trust me.
Of course I trust you.
Remus said, appalled.
I would trust you with my life.
What about my life?
Sirius asked. His eyes flickered down to his belly.
Our lives.
Remus frowned. Sirius knew Remus trusted him to look after himself. Ever since the incident with Lucius, he had been the pinnacle of responsibility and good choices. Even when it had killed him to do so, like letting Remus take care of the chores, or paint the new nursery. But this wasn't the same thing. Sirius couldn't control the wolf. He didn't know what was going on in Remus's head. Failing to maul Isaac didn't prove he wouldn't lose himself when.
You're not going to hurt me,
Sirius said firmly.
If you can't trust yourself, then trust me.
He rose to his feet, holding out a hand.
Come on.
Remus hesitated, but he was never very good at denying Sirius. And perhaps he needed it, too. Perhaps he had never wanted to be proven wrong so much in his entire life. He took Sirius's hand, let him lead them to the bedroom. Once there, Sirius drew him into a full-bodied hug. Wary as he was, Remus couldn't help but melt into it. Sirius had always fit perfectly in his arms, even now with the precious obstruction between them. Especially now. Sirius rose up on his toes to tuck his face into Remus's shoulder, sighing happily as he scented him. Cautiously, Remus allowed himself to inhale Sirius too, trying not to fret over the immediate spiking of his pulse, the answering hardening of his cock. He could already feel the ferality poised at the edge of his mind, that dark itch that made him want to take. It was different than the usual driving force he felt when they made love, different even to when Sirius was in heat, because it made him unacceptably selfish. The wolf wasn't particularly interested in whether or not Sirius experienced pleasure. It only wanted to assert itself, make sure he, and everyone else, knew who was in charge. Of course, Sirius was serious, so he enjoyed himself anyway, and Remus had always been able to retain enough of himself to make sure of that. He wanted desperately to trust in Sirius now, and believe that nothing had changed. That he had as much control as he ever did.
It's okay,
Sirius murmured, low and soothing in Remus's ear. He took Remus's head in his hands.
Kiss me.
Remus obediently pressed their mouths together, letting his hands wander over Sirius's shoulders, down his back, curving around to take hold of his hips. Sirius made an encouraging noise, fingers winding into Remus's hair. He dipped his tongue into the kiss to coax it deeper, hotter, and Remus felt himself responding, winding up, flushing. Still, he was on edge. When Sirius flinched suddenly, Remus flinched too, almost backpedaling from him. But Sirius grabbed one of his wrists before he could.
Oh, here, quick.
He pushed Remus's hand under his t-shirt, holding his palm flat against his belly.
There. You feel it?
Oh,
Remus breathed.
yes.
He had felt the baby move before, of course. But he couldn't remember ever feeling quite so astounded by it. He braced himself for the snarl behind his eyes, the chant of mine, 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 and it was there, certainly, but the swell of his heart was louder. Sirius tipped their foreheads together, so they were both peering down at their joined hands.
They might be a wolf.
Remus tensed, but Sirius shushed him, kissing his cheek.
No, they might be. You need to accept that. Just like you need to accept they'll still be perfect.
They both exhaled as another kick hit Remus's palm.
Feel that, and tell me it isn't fucking perfect.
I can't tell you that.
Remus said thickly.
You know I can't.
Sirius pressed his lips to Remus's neck, mouthing at the point where his scent was strongest.
When I feel that, your child, moving around inside me, I get so fucking wet. All I can think about is how much I love that we did this. How I can't wait to have our family.
God, sweetheart.
Remus managed. He grasped to pull Sirius closer, as close as they could get.
You're right. Our child will be perfect, no matter what.
The words tumbled out before he could stop them.
Sometimes, I just can't believe this is my life. That you truly did want this with me. I don't deserve.
Sirius sunk his teeth into Remus's neck. Not deep enough to really hurt, but the shock of it had Remus jerking back.
Don't you dare,
Sirius said lowly, looking so dangerous Remus felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end.
Don't you ever say you don't deserve this, Remus. We fucking earned this. After all the shit we went through, everything we lost. What was the fucking point of all that, if we don't get to be happy now? You saying it was all for nothing?
Of course not,
Remus said, stricken. Sirius nodded.
Then take off your clothes.
Sirius.
Did I stutter?
Remus exhaled.
Everything.
Sirius nodded again, taking a step back. He looked at once impassive and intense as he watched Remus strip. The air was heavy in the silence that followed. Remus's skin prickled as Sirius's eyes raked openly over him. Since they had been together, he had grown more comfortable with his appearance than he ever thought possible, but he still wasn't accustomed to being put on display like this. He could feel the wolf grumbling at the indignity of it. It was the first time it had really made itself known.
Merlin, you're beautiful, Mooney,
Sirius said eventually.
How can you not know it? Just look at you.
Remus swallowed a scoff. It wasn't that he didn't believe Sirius meant it, but there had always been an incredulity inherent in being complimented by Sirius Black. Being in his presence made it hard to remember beauty existed anywhere else. Sirius raised an eyebrow, like he knew what Remus was thinking. He jerked his chin towards the bed.
Lie down. On your back. I'm gonna ride you.
The wolf bristled further with the command, but the rest of Remus shivered. He wasn't used to his mate this way, so calm and controlled. Sirius didn't give orders. He demanded things, certainly, but that wasn't quite the same. There was something undeniably intriguing about it, enough to overrule the part of Remus demanding he take back control. Once he was on the bed, Sirius stripped as if there was no hurry, but Remus could see the flush rising on his face, and moments after his underwear hit the floor the air was thick with the scent of his arousal. He tugged the tie from his hair, letting it tumble down around his shoulders, and no, Remus could never forget how gorgeous Sirius was, but it somehow never ceased to be a revelation anyway. He was almost glowing in the sun shining in from the window, light catching against the swell of his belly, cock straining against the underside of the curve. Remus already felt breathless even before Sirius joined him on the bed. Sirius crawled carefully on top of him, settling with his knees either side of Remus's hips, holding himself up with his strong thighs. It was then that Remus felt a prickle of worry for the first time. The sight of Sirius above him, with his belly so huge and his scar bared, had the wolf rearing up within him. It told him to pull Sirius down, pull him roughly onto his cock. Shove him over onto his hands and knees, make him present, make him take it. Remus shut his eyes, willing it to be quiet, clenching his fingers in the sheets.
Look at me,
Sirius commanded. Remus drew a deep breath and obeyed. If he wasn't breathless before, the look on Sirius's face would have stolen the last of his air. He looked so certain.
You're not going to hurt me,
Sirius stated.
Say it.
I'm not going to hurt you,
Remus echoed, voice catching as he finally believed it was true.
I would die before I hurt you.
Sirius smiled.
That's right.
He reached behind himself, grasping Remus's cock, angling it so the length slid into his cleft. Sirius was so wet already, hot slick smearing over Remus's cock as he rocked back and forth, coating every inch of him. Remus tried to measure his breaths as Sirius guided the head into himself, feeling that tight clutch of muscle yield and open for him, encasing him slowly in soft, rippling, breathtaking heat. He trembled against the urge to shove his hips up and bury himself right away. The pregnancy had made Sirius's body pliant, similar to when he was in heat, but that didn't mean he shouldn't be careful. He wasn't going to hurt him.
Fuck.
Sirius moaned indulgently when he was all the way down.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I needed. I only hurt when I don't have you.
Oh, love.
Remus breathed.
I'm sorry, I've been a fool.
Yeah.
Sirius agreed, but he was still smiling. He shifted in Remus's lap, settling himself, flexing his thighs. They shared a gasp when he tensed suddenly, clenching tight around Remus's cock.
Oh fuck, I love you.
Remus exhaled shakily.
I love you too. I'm so blessed to have you. So lucky you're mine.
You'll always have me.
Sirius promised, voice tight as he started to rock with more purpose, building a rhythm.
Always yours, Mooney. Touch me. Put your hands on me.
Remus hadn't realized he was waiting for permission, but his knuckles were white where they were still twisted in the sheets. He didn't hesitate to slide his hands up Sirius's thighs, until he was cupping Sirius's belly again, spreading his palms over the impossibly taut skin. It was cumbersome between them, huge and hot and imposing, but its presence was inflaming them both. As Sirius rode him, he couldn't seem to tear his eyes away from Remus's hands. When Remus strained up to press a kiss between them, Sirius's breath whistled through his teeth.
God, Remus.
I know.
I love this.
Sirius confessed breathlessly.
I love feeling full with you. Filled fucking everywhere. Inside me in every fucking way.
The words had a growl working its way into Remus's throat, but this time, he let it come. He wasn't afraid anymore.
I love it too, seeing you like this, and knowing it was me who did it to you. Knowing you begged me to do this to you.
Sirius whined, head tipping back, clutching at Remus's hands on his belly as his hips worked harder. His movements were getting erratic already, cock smacking unevenly against the underside of his stomach.
I want you to do it again. Already, I want.
Remus grabbed for Sirius's hips, tugging him into each thrust of his own.
God, you really mean that, don't you, sweetheart? You would let me keep you like this all the time. You would fill our whole house with children.
He groaned when Sirius nodded frantically.
I love that. I love that you would do that with me. You've never tried to hide. You've always been proud to be mine.
Sirius made a sound, wanting and fierce. He lunged forwards, huffing when his belly prevented him from reaching Remus's mouth.
Fuck, can we? On my side.
Yes, yes.
Remus still mourned the loss when Sirius pulled from his cock. Sirius stole the kiss he was denied, hot and clumsy, and then they were scrambling to reposition themselves. Sirius fell to the mattress next to him, and Remus spooned quickly against his back, sliding an arm under his head to encase him in his arms. The rightness of it was overwhelming, their bodies slotted together like two pieces of a puzzle. Remus pressed his face into the nape of Sirius's neck, inhaling greedily, heart racing as that perfect, intoxicating scent washed over him. His cock was flush and sticky against Sirius's lower back. The wolf was snarling for him to push it back inside, sink his teeth into the flesh before him and rub mindlessly into Sirius until they were locked together. But Remus pushed it down, told it to wait, and felt not a scrap of doubt that it would. The wolf could have what it wanted, but Sirius would be consumed by pleasure first. He cupped Sirius's arse, pressing his fingers into the sodden cleft, circling the hot and swollen opening to Sirius's body. He reveled in how deliciously responsive Sirius was to his touch, how he always had been, twitching and clenching against Remus's stroking fingertips, as though trying to draw him back inside. He pushed in with two, crooking them to rub deliberately against that sweet, tender spot inside Sirius. He stroked over Sirius's chest with his other hand, pinching and teasing his nipples until they were stiff and sensitive, and Sirius was writhing in his arms. His breath wound higher, tighter, until it broke on a desperate whine.
Enough. I need you back inside me.
Remus instantly pulled his fingers free, stroking more slick over his cock. Sirius pushed his arse back as Remus rubbed the head over his hole. He was so wet and pliant it slipped easily inside him, yanking a gasp from them both, sending Remus's mind spinning.
More.
Sirius rasped.
I need it all.
Greedy little thing,
Remus heard himself say. He yanked Sirius tight against his chest, burying himself to the hilt in one hard push.
Like that, love.
Just like that.
Sirius moaned.
God, I love your cock, Mooney. So fucking big, feels so fucking good.
This is the only cock you'll ever have, darling,
Remus's voice said. He slipped a hand between them again, tracing the taut, slick skin of Sirius's hole where it was stretched wide around him, flush against the bump of his brewing knot.
The only one you'll ever feel inside you. The only knot you'll ever take.
Holy fuck.
Sirius choked. He grabbed behind himself until he snagged a handful of Remus's hair, arching his back until his head slotted onto Remus's shoulder.
Yeah, yes. You, Remus, only you.
His neck was stretched out beneath Remus's mouth now, bringing his scent thick and rich into the back of Remus's throat. Remus felt something inside him snap, the last of his restraint splintering away.
Sirius,
he managed.
I need.
Yes.
Sirius answered immediately. He turned his head and kissed Remus messily.
It's okay. It's all okay. I'm yours. Fuck me, take what you need.
Remus moaned brokenly, overwhelmed with the trust, the surge of certainty granted and given by both of them. He gave in, let the wolf take over, rutting into Sirius with hard, careless strokes, filling the room with the pornographic slap of skin on skin. He registered vaguely that it was too sloppy a rhythm and angle to make Sirius come, but Sirius was loud anyway, eagerly submissive, gladly taking everything Remus gave him. It was exactly what Remus needed. Sirius had to know, in his bones, that Remus was here. He had to know that every inch of him belonged to Remus, from the blood in his veins to the baby in his belly. He had to know that Remus would keep him safe, keep him marked and claimed and reeking of Remus, so everybody who even looked at him would know to stay away. Growling, Remus nosed Sirius's hair out of the way to get to his scar. Sirius's scent was strongest there, and Remus imagined he could hear his racing pulse beneath the mottled skin. He parted his teeth and sunk them deep, tightening his arms around Sirius when he thrashed and moaned, fingers twisting painfully in Remus's hair. When Remus's hand brushed the bulge of Sirius's belly, he came unexpectedly, jerking them both as his knot caught suddenly inside of Sirius's body. His vision widened out for a moment, shocked by the impact of all-consuming pleasure and relief. Then he registered Sirius tugging at his hand, urging it down under the curve of his belly.
Please, touch me, please.
Sirius begged, hoarse, and though Remus was still reeling and half-feral he obeyed without question, straining forwards to take Sirius's cock in his hand. The angle was a little awkward, his knuckles bumping Sirius's protruding stomach, but Sirius moaned and came barely a second after Remus touched him, shuddering and clenching rhythmically around Remus's still pulsing cock, pulling guttural noises from both their throats. Remus wrung the orgasm out of them both, gradually slowing his strokes until they were limp and panting. He was glad they were already lying down. He was abruptly exhausted, as though he had run for miles. Though it was not only an exhaustion in the physical sense, but a profound sense of being drained.
Fucking hell, Mooney.
Sirius drawled.
You animal.
Remus laughed breathlessly. He pressed his damp forehead again to the nape of Sirius's neck, inhaling deeply, rumbling with satisfaction when he found his scent sweet and satiated.
Mine,
he said, just to hear it in his own voice.
Yes,
Sirius murmured. He pushed back into Remus's embrace, and the divine heat stretched around Remus's knot tightened, making them both inhale.
how's the wolf?
Remus closed his eyes.
quiet.
He admitted. Sirius hummed. Remus thought he heard a hint of smugness in it. But Sirius didn't say anything out loud, even though he surely wanted to, and Merlin, Remus loved him. Truthfully, he wouldn't have begrudged Sirius an "I told you so," because Remus should have known to trust him. Unlike Remus, who would rather disassociate himself from the wolf, Sirius had accepted it as just another side of him, and thus had known, of course he had known, that no part of Remus could ever hurt him. Really, there was nothing in the world that could pull them apart. God knows the world had tried already, but it had failed, and that told Remus everything he needed to know. Sirius was right about that too. They had earned this. And Remus had many flaws, but he would be damned if ingratitude was one of them. He splayed his hand over Sirius's belly, feeling nothing but contentment when he thought of what waited beneath his palm. Sirius tangled their fingers together with a purr, holding him there. He turned his head, pressing a clumsy kiss to the side of Remus's mouth.
Harry needs picking up, soon. It's nearly 3.
Remus was regretful for a moment, before joy sparked inside him.
Let's go together.
Yeah,
Sirius said brightly.
all right.
They cleaned up quickly after they disentangled, dressing lightly for the warmth outside. The street was bright with summer, but Harry's face wasn't so sunny when he emerged from the school gates. He didn't even wave goodbye to Ron.
Hey ya, Sprog.
Sirius said, leaning down to hug him.
What's wrong?
Nothing.
Harry grumbled, but he looked pleasantly surprised to see both of them there. It wasn't often they were both able to pick him up, with one thing or another.
Mooney.
Hello, Harry.
Remus greeted, hoping he was truly forgiven for his careless tone earlier. It was a relief when Harry immediately reached up for a hug from him, too.
Did you have a good day?
Harry said.
Come on, tell us about it.
Sirius encouraged. They set off walking slowly back towards the house, Harry's little feet scuffing against the uneven cobbles of the pavement. He was quiet for a while, but they didn't push him. They knew he would speak when he was ready.
Did Hera say hi to me?
Harry asked eventually.
She did, indeed.
Remus confirmed.
Did she say the baby's okay?
Sirius said.
The baby is fine, Harry.
Remus assured him.
You don't need to worry about that.
Harry nodded. There was another silence.
What if they don't like me?
Why wouldn't they like you?
Harry's shoulders hunched.
Don't know.
Hey,
Sirius said, lightly nudging his side.
tell us.
Harry mumbled something, then squawked when Sirius squeezed his ribs.
Okay. Well, there's this girl at school. She said I'm bad.
Why did she say that?
'Cause of my scar. She said it means I'm cursed.
Did she? Now,
Sirius shared a conspiratorial look with Remus.
you think she's right?
I don't know.
Harry said.
I feel bad sometimes.
Everyone feels bad sometimes. That doesn't mean you are bad.
But bad things happen 'cause of me.
What?
Sirius and Remus said at the same time. Sirius's voice was louder.
That's complete bull. That's not true at all.
She said that's why I don't have a family.
You do have a family.
Sirius said fiercely.
You have me and Mooney.
Mooney and I.
Remus corrected, smiling when Sirius rolled his eyes.
It's true, you do.
I told her that.
Harry grumbled.
She said it didn't count. 'Cause you're not my mummy and daddy.
She sounds like a real charmer.
Sirius said through gritted teeth.
As if biology guarantees any.
Sirius.
Remus said. He stilled them all, then crouched down so he was eye level with Harry.
Listen, Harry. There are many different kinds of families. The only thing that makes it count is love, and taking care of each other. You know we love you, don't you?
Yes.
Harry said quietly.
And we take care of you.
Yes.
So,
Harry's mouth twisted with worry as he looked at Remus with unsure eyes. Sirius leaned over him, pointing to Remus's face.
Look, Sprog. Mooney has a scar. Do you think he's cursed?
Remus tensed, but Harry's eyes widened, like it was the first time he had noticed the ugly, jagged line that cut across Remus's features.
No.
So you don't think Mooney's bad?
No.
Harry frowned, like the idea was confusing or offensive.
So, if the baby was like Mooney,
Sirius,
Remus warned, but it was weak.
if your little brother or sister was like Mooney,
Sirius pressed.
would that be okay?
Yes.
Harry said easily.
Because Min is good.
Sirius raised an eyebrow at Remus. Like that was that. A child had declared an obvious truth, therefore Remus was idiotic for ever considering the contrary. It was ridiculous, not to mention inadmissible as evidence, since Harry didn't even really know what he was answering. His lycanthropy was a teenager-level admission, they had decided, and Sirius had practically bullied him into saying it anyway. Yet there was a lump in Remus's throat, all the same.
That's right.
Sirius put an arm around Harry, playfully jostling him.
And you're good too, kiddo. That's why the baby's gonna love you. And why you should tell that girl to bugger off.
Harry gasped, giggling.
Can I?
no.
Remus said firmly.
Just explain why she's wrong. Everything that Padfoot said.
He looked at Sirius.
It should make for a compelling argument, since it's all absolutely true.
Okay.
Harry said.
But what if she keeps being mean?
Then she's a lost cause. Tell her to leave you alone.
Sirius smirked.
That's what I said. Bugger off.
Remus sighed.
I suppose if polite words fail. You certainly don't have to put up with anyone making you feel bad, Harry. But make sure you try telling the teacher first, okay?
Okay.
Harry agreed. He looked a lot happier now.
Can I have sweets when we get home?
I think we can arrange that.
Remus said.
Just wanna take a quick detour.
Sirius said after they continued walking.
Furniture place on the high street.
Remus thought about protesting. But it was only a thought. Finite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora.